What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne Yang with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan's legislature is still in session months after it usually ends. That's because of an extension until the end of this month, and now it could go on even longer. Tiffany Wang explains why opposition parties are pushing for this change.
Taiwan's lawmakers may have their longest session ever. That's if a proposal backed by the opposition Kuomintang and Taiwan People's Party passes. The legislative session usually ends in May, and it's already been extended until the end of July. But the opposition parties, which together control the legislature, want to extend it even further, all the way until the end of August. They say this would give lawmakers time to review some major bills, including AI regulations and a proposal for a cash handout. The extra 2 months would also give them time to review President Lai Ching-te's second round of justice nominees for Taiwan's top court. That's been sitting in limbo since new regulations for rulings were put in place earlier this year. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party has questioned the motivation behind the extensions, saying it could allow KMT lawmakers to push legislation to help them win voter support in recall votes. 26 KMT lawmakers are facing such votes in July and August. But if the session is extended again, the balance of power in the legislature could change. If at least 12 lawmakers are removed, that could give the DPP the edge they need, at least until the seats can be filled in a by-election. With just weeks to go before the first round of recall votes, lawmakers will be working hard to mobilize voters and prove their competence in the legislature. Chris Ma and Tiffany Wang in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan says in-person tariff talks in the United States are still ongoing. That's after the Trump administration sent out new tariff notices to 14 countries. Taiwan wasn't included in the list, but it's fueled speculation about what exporters will face once the talks are over. John Van Trieste reports.
The White House has announced 25% tariffs on Japanese and South Korean goods starting in August. 12 other countries are supposed to get similar notices soon, with a deadline for a trade deal extended to August 1st. Taiwan's not on this priority list, but that doesn't mean it can avoid U.S. tariffs forever. This is, after all, a country U.S. President Donald Trump has specifically accused of, quote, stealing the U.S. chip industry. As tariff uncertainty hits both U.S. and Taiwanese stocks, some people are asking, when Taiwan gets its tariff notice, how big a headache for exporters will it be? Officials say a string of talks, virtual and in person, aren't finished yet, so it's too early to comment. But those in economics and business have drawn their own conclusions. Some imagine a tariff rate far lower than the 32% the Trump administration first announced in April, before hitting the pause button.
一般的关税我猜大概在15% 左右，应该是一个合理的推测。如果我们跟我们的竞争对手国来比，那我们的关税并没有特别高的话，其实以台湾厂商的竞争力和韧性来讲，其实受到的影响其实是不会太大的。
But others say the tariff rate itself isn't the only problem for exporters. The Taiwan dollar has strengthened against the U.S. dollar in recent months. That makes Taiwan's goods more expensive, and when added to the tariffs, this could be more than many businesses can take.
假使关税是超过20几%或者30%，加息下来就40-50%，40-50%我们是受不了的，很多的这个厂商就可能出走。
And there could be another tariff just on chips coming by late August, making things even tougher for Taiwan's firms. After a long period of reliance on the Chinese market, Taiwan has been exporting more and more to the U.S. And in some months, the U.S. is Taiwan's biggest market. In May, for instance, the U.S. bought 30% of Taiwan's exports, compared to the roughly 27% for China and Hong Kong combined. So there's a lot riding on trade talks with the U.S., as the time for talking runs out. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Typhoon Danas has moved away from Taiwan, but it left significant damage in its wake, affecting some of Taiwan's most developed areas. Cadence Coranta has this report on the storm's aftermath.
Cleanup is underway along Taiwan's west coast after Typhoon Danas swept through the region. Its strong winds and heavy rain killing 2 people and injuring over 650, blowing down trees and road signs and cutting off power to over 700,000 households. Taiwan's main electricity provider says it's been working to restore power, but around 180,000 homes are still in the dark.
因为这个大概是40年来第一个从这个 云嘉南平原进来的台风，所以它都是平原嘛，没有什么阻挡，所以损害的情况还蛮严重的。那台电已经从南部、北部还有东部都调人员下去，主要的云嘉南去支援的。
The typhoon also caused an estimated $8 million in agricultural damage, with cleanup just beginning. In Zhanghua, onion farmers said their crops had been ruined by the rain, and in Yunlin, corn stalks were blown over. The hardest hit crop was pomelos, swept off their trees by large gusts of wind. In some areas, 80 to 90% were ruined. President Lai Ching-te is expected to inspect the damage this afternoon, and the army was dispatched to help with cleanup efforts. Taiwan's military has also helped with evacuating people from Taiwan's outlying islands, where thousands of people had been stranded after the typhoon grounded flights. They arranged planes to transport over 500 people out of Taiwan's Jinmen Islands near China, but many others are still waiting on standby for flights. Taiwan is now clear of Typhoon Danaz, but the damage it's caused remains, affecting people's lives and livelihoods with a tough cleanup ahead. Justin Wu and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Central Taiwan is seeing heavy downpours even after Typhoon Danaz has moved away from the country. In Zhanghua, floodwaters rose to knee height at the historic Lukang Tianhou Temple, submerging incense burners and offering tables. At least 104 people are now confirmed dead from the catastrophic flash flooding in the U.S. state of Texas as the chance of finding survivors fades. The death toll includes 27 children and counselors from a summer camp. 11 more are still missing. The flooding has caused upwards of $22 billion in damage and economic losses. Residents are asking why early weather warnings were not issued for the floods, with some blaming federal cuts to the National Weather Service. Millions of people are now at risk of further flooding, with more heavy rain expected throughout the area. Global interest in Taiwan's self-defense capabilities is rising ahead of the country's annual Hanguang military exercises. In the latest episode of DC Insiders, Dmitry Alperovich, chair of Silverado Policy Accelerator, explains why Taiwan's position at the center of the first island chain matters to both China and the United States.
Can you make that argument about why Taiwan matters to the United States?
Absolutely. I think, and I've been going around the country for almost a year now since the release of my book, talking to people all over the country, not just in big cities, but rural areas, business communities, etc., of the importance of Taiwan and the threat to Taiwan that I think it faces in the coming decade. And to me, it comes down to geostrategic position of Taiwan. When you look at the map, it becomes very clear what the Chinese dilemma is. And by the way, I can totally appreciate, if I was sitting in Xi Jinping's shoes, why Taiwan matters to him, right? Because you feel surrounded, right? When China looks out at the world, it sees to its far east, South Korea, where you have 28,000 American troops, air bases, naval installations. Further down, the Japanese islands, where you have the headquarters of the U.S. Naval 7th Fleet and Marine Expeditionary Force on Okinawa. On the other side, you have the Philippines, where the United States is now back and has access to 9 military bases and deploying intermediate range missiles that can hit China. And then at the very center of that is Taiwan, that China views as an outpost of U.S. power, the cork that keeps China bottled up in East China Sea and South China Sea, with the Philippines helping out as well. So for an economy that is hugely dependent on imports of raw materials, as China is, particularly oil, but other iron ore, etc., and for an economy that is incredibly dependent on export, as China is, to have that ability to be contained by your primary rival, the United States and its allies, is unacceptable, right? And they want to escape that containment and turn the tables on the United States, I think, because if they take Taiwan, then you can project power across that entire region. You can now endanger the U.S. Sea-based lines of communications to Japan, to Korea, to the Philippines, and push the United States military all the way out to Hawaii and really establish a hegemonic position in East Asia. And then, of course, you have Taiwan being such a vital economy to microelectronics and the semiconductor industry. So letting that be destroyed in a conflict or even worse, fall into China is not in the strategic interest of the United States. But it starts with the geography, and the fact is that Taiwan has always been important to the United States, going back to the 1800s when we first started to approach Formosa with our civilian ships and military ships as well. And it comes down to 1950, General Douglas MacArthur called it an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
Right.
Long before the age of chips and computing, it was always viewed as that vital place in the world that is really important to contain Red China, as they called it at the time. And one other point I want to make is that when you go to Taiwan, you get a real appreciation for how difficult this mission would be should the Chinese ever attempt it. This island is a natural fortress. Of course, the waters in Taiwan Strait, incredibly rough. Waters near Taiwan's beaches, very shallow. You've got mountains, rivers, tunnels. This is the last place anyone should want to invade. In fact, the United States knows a lot about it because in 1944, when, of course, Taiwan was under Japanese occupation, we thought about doing it right after
decided not to.
Normandy, and we realized it would be too hard. Right? So for the country that had pulled off the greatest amphibious invasion in history, Operation Overlord on D-Day, this was considered too hard. It's only gotten harder in the intervening 80 years because defense has gotten such a huge military advantage.
That was Dmitry Alperovich, chair of Silverado Policy Accelerator and author of World on the Brink. You can watch the full interview on DC Insiders, available on YouTube and TaiwanPlus.com. Members of the Hong Kong community in Taiwan are marking 5 years since Beijing imposed its draconian national security law on the territory. They are urging the public to keep a close eye on how the situation there continues to unfold. Alan Liu reports.
It's been 5 years since the sweeping national security law came into force in Hong Kong. Since then, many Hong Kongers have chosen to leave the territory and move overseas. On Monday, some of those now residing in Taiwan gathered to talk about how Beijing's repeal of civil liberties has impacted the lives of people back home.
当年香港的自由、法治、繁荣跟幸福，已经被今天的专制、党治、萧条跟迷惘取代。红色恐怖横行，自我审查猖獗。
Since the law took effect, scholars say schools and public institutions have stepped up so-called patriotic education, teaching the importance of always keeping China's interests in mind. For example, since 2022, universities in Hong Kong have made national security courses mandatory. School teachers must undergo national security training, and young people hoping to become civil servants must pass exams on the matter. But that doesn't mean all resistance to Beijing's authority has been stamped out, as one academic explains.
香港的年轻人不是没有反抗，而只是在表面上，去表达一个对香港政府的忠诚，以维护自己的安全。但是在私底下，还是有很多的领域正在偷偷的反抗。
Hong Kongers want the Taiwanese public to keep paying attention to what's happening in Hong Kong. They are also calling for more support for Hong Kongers choosing to relocate to Taiwan under the current political climate to help them settle and rebuild their lives. Ryan Wu and Alan Liu for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is taking home a huge medal haul from the 2025 World Police and Fire Games in the U.S. state of Alabama.
In the red lane, Team Taiwan going up against Huntsville, Alabama.
The country bagged a total of 74 gold, 42 silver, and 48 bronze in events including stair racing, judo, ultimate firefighter, half marathon, and badminton. This marks the country's highest medal count since it began competing in 1999. The next games will be held in Perth in 2027. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Before we go, let's take a dip in the Seine, where swimming is allowed again after a century-old ban was lifted. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
For more news from Taiwan and the world, follow TaiwanPlus on social media.